When I first moved to Spain 10 years ago, I had no idea about Spanish wine. I was really overwhelmed. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what to order. I knew nothing. You see, there's so many regions, there's so many different styles, and when you go to the stock standard average everyday tapas bar, sometimes it feels like there's not a great selection available. And sometimes when you talk to a waiter or a bartender, you feel like they don't really know, enough to give you good recommendations about the wines they have themselves. I know a lot of you guys are confused as well because I asked you on Instagram and I got a lot of questions about Spanish wine, a hell of a lot. Over the last 10 years of living here, I've drank a lot of wine, I've read a lot of wine books about Spain, and so today I really want to take you under my wine wing and some of my favorite kind of places to drink wine here in Madrid and help you understand kind of what's the deal with wine in Spain, what's the, dare I say, problem with wine in Spain. This is not a video about what different regions taste like or what wine to order when you go into a wine shop or a bar. I know you have a lot of questions about that, but I've made videos about those topics, about, Rioja, Ribera. I'll put those links in the description below. Some of the things that I'm going to say today might annoy a few people, but so be it. But the goal in the end is so that you can come to Spain and enjoy wine just like I do. Now, where are Yoly and Lucia? You might be asking. They were in the last video. Now, with the new family situation, you might have the odd video just with me because, hey, it's a little complex to do a wine video with a baby and all that sort of stuff, but don't worry, they will be in videos coming up. The other thing, if you're watching this kind of as it comes out on the 14th of November here on the channel at 7 p.m. CET Spanish time or Madrid time, we're doing a live wine tasting. That's the 14th of November, 7 p.m. CET, we're doing a live wine tasting, so tune in for that. But in the meantime, let's drink some wine. Venga, let's go.
Hola Luciano, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. ¿Qué tal?
So Spain is wine country, right? Well, yes it is, but maybe not quite as you think. Yes, it is because we're one of the largest producers of wine in the world. We have massive covering of vines in the world. There's a huge variety of regions and variety and quality available. But on the other hand, the not as you think side of it, there's a massive gap, in my opinion, between the quality and the variety of the wine that's made in the vineyard and the quality and the variety of wine that in Spain is available in your average tapas bar, your average restaurant and supermarkets. And it's this gap between what is made and what seems like is kind of readily available that confuses a lot of tourists when they come to Spain and confuses a lot of wine lovers when they come to Spain. Okay, so here are 3 ground rules that you need to keep in mind when you think about wine in Spain. Number 1, a lot of Spaniards actually drink beer, not wine. So don't think that everybody's here constantly ordering wine in the bars. It's not the case. Number 2, a lot of people in this country would think that spending over €5 for a bottle of wine is actually spending a lot of money. Now, that's fine. You don't have to spend a lot of money on wine, but don't think that everybody's sort of really picking, quality wine and spending their hard-earned money on wine and being really selective about what they buy. And 3, a lot of people in this country actually don't know much about wine. Now, nor should they. It's not a requirement that you know about wine. Of course, I don't want you to come here and think that everybody in this country, because it's a place that has a wonderful history and rich variety of wine, means that everybody here is really knowledgeable about it, because it's not the case. And that includes a lot of bartenders and waiters, unfortunately. So why is there this seemingly great gap between the variety of what's made and the variety of what's often available? Well, I remember going to one of my favorite tapas bars. The guy, it's now closed because Carlos, the owner, retired. He only started serving wine in wine glasses in the 1980s. Before that, it was just from a wine skin and it was tumblers that the wine was served in, really kind of rustic and basic. And I think that's really important. And it goes to show that historically wine in this country has really been a bit of a commodity. A lot of people drank it, but drank kind of just the wine that was available without paying a lot of attention. Being into wine was the preserve of the wealthy, or maybe if you made wine or you lived in a wine region. But for most people, it was like, a tumbler of vino tinto. So it turns out that my microphone wasn't working for this shot, which I won't take personally, but it does mean I have to do this funny little voiceover to tell you what I was telling you, but that you can't hear. There are a lot of wine regions in Spain, 69 of them, and that's not counting the sub-regions and the kind of wine regions that aren't official wine regions. It's very complicated. And there's an incredible variety and richness across all those 69, each one reflecting certain traditions and history. But there's 4 regions that are the big famous ones. For red wine, it's Rioja and Ribera del Duero, and for white wines it's Rías Baixas, where the Albarino grape is famous, or Rueda. And those are the most famous regions kind of inside Spain and outside Spain. But guys, that's only 4 regions. There are 65 others that are there to be explored and discovered. And so you might be wondering, how can you explore these other 65 regions or explore the smaller producers in the big 4 when it feels like half the tapas bars and restaurants and shops you walk into only have those big 4? Well, there's really 3 ways. You've got to go to a great wine bar or restaurant, the kind of place that's going to have a decent list. And there are places across Spain that are like that, like La Fisna, this place I'm in right now. The second way is to go to a great wine shop. Don't go to the supermarket. Generally in supermarkets, you're going to find a much more limited range. And the third way is, look, go to the region itself. When you're planning your tour of Spain, go to these smaller regions and visit wineries, take a wine tour, drink in the local bars. And while Spain is famous for its big, hearty Spanish reds, it's almost become like the cliche of Spanish wine. You have to think of Spanish wine in a more modern sense as well, that the regions, many of these 69 regions are really evolving and changing and aren't just all big and heavy. If you go to the northwest of Spain recently, a year ago was it? Yoly and I were in Ribeira Sacra in Galicia. If you remember, Fabio, the son of the winemaker, took us out to see the vineyards. Previous generations were making pretty stock standard wine on those hills, but him and his father have really revolutionized what they're growing to make finer wines, and this is really important. A lot of younger people in the last sort of 20 plus years have really started making more modern wines in a lot of parts of Spain that really break this tradition of big, bold, hearty reds. In the last 20, 30 years, Spain has made a huge leap forward in terms of quality and variety of wine, and a lot of these regions are respecting the tradition and the terroir, but they're also embracing kind of new ideas for the future with the evolution of Spanish wine, and particularly a lot of interest from international markets when it comes to Spanish wine. We do have a bit of a problem that we need to talk about when it comes to Spanish wine, and that is price. Okay, so I'm in my local supermarket, and the most expensive, 2 most expensive bottles of red wine, $5.85 and $6.55, and they're both super common, bulk-made industrial red wines. And you can get decent wine in Spain for that price. But here's the thing: good wine costs money to make. I generally spend about sort of €9 plus, and I find that if you spend a little bit more, that's when you can get into the really interesting stuff, the low production, made with love. There's nothing wrong with spending 2, 3, 4, 5 euros on a bottle of wine at all, but I feel like people often get very militant about how cheap Spanish wine must be. But here's the thing: if your goal in watching this video is you really want to explore Spanish wine more widely, then you're not going to find it on these shelves, guys. You're going to have to, nudge that price up a little bit, and you're going to have to really start to explore the variety of wine that's available, and it's wonderful once you start exploring it. You see, I want to push back against this idea that Spain is the land of cheap wine. How many travel articles have been written, probably a few by me, where we've glorified the idea of nights in tapas bars over tumblers of cheap red Spanish wine, and it just doesn't do it justice. Yes, the fact is, in Spain, it's a really cost-effective place to drink wine, so that means you can push the boat out a little bit, and whatever you spend, you're going to be getting great bang for your buck. Go on, spend what you're comfortable with, but don't just think that this is the place to drink the cheap stuff. If you spend a little more, you're more likely to get a wine that truly tastes like the region it's from, rather than something a little more made at scale and industrialized. So you're probably wondering that when you're in Spain, where should you buy Spanish wine? Now here's the thing: 70% of wine in Spain is sold in the supermarkets. But as you've seen, that the supermarkets don't necessarily have a great supply of wine, a great variety available. Now it will depend from supermarket to supermarket, but a lot of them, just really in the in-stock, like the big brands, the kind of the industrial wines, and we won't have the variety that will really help you explore Spanish wine. So here's the thing: when you're here, I really want you to buck that trend, that 70%. And I want you to go and find wine shops. A lot of them are family run and small, like this place in the center of Madrid, right in the historic center. This is called Mariano Madroeño. It's been around for 125 years in the same family. I mean, look at all the history behind me. Here you can actually, support a small business. You can have a conversation with someone about the wine, and you can get access to a much better selection. Now, sometimes it actually can be quite hard to find wine shops, I feel like, in Spain. There's a lot of supermarkets, easy to find those and buy wine from them, but these kind of places can be a little hard to track track down. There's just not this massive range of wine shops everywhere all over the cities. So what I suggest is you ask in your hotel, ask the concierge or the host that you're staying with, find out where there's a local bodega or little wine shop. It's going to be much better. You're going to end up with a much more enjoyable experience of buying Spanish wine if you do that. And just as an aside, for the fellow history buffs out there, if you do come to this wine shop, Mariano Madrueño, you need to come out the back and check out the little museum they have. This place started off 125 years ago as a liquor fabrica, as a little kind of factory of licores, flavored alcohol that was the trend at the time, and they've still got all the old kind of artifacts here. This is the kind of history that you're experiencing when you come into a place like this. Much more interesting than the supermarket. So if you come here, check out the little museum. So someone asked on Instagram how they can order better wine in Spanish bars. You know, they said they just go into a place and ask for vino tinto and hope for the best. Well, to be honest, there's no magic bullet. You need to educate yourself. You need to read. As I say, there's resources below in the description. You need to taste a lot. You need to travel. You need to do all of that and just treat learning about Spanish wine as a discovery. There's kind of no wrong choices, right? You know, to be honest, half the time I don't know what I'm getting when I order a Spanish wine, but I do know the kind of the profile of the region, so I can kind of guide. I know if I want something lighter or something heavier, but do know that if you're going to a more rustic place, you're going to get rustic wine, and that's perfectly okay. Well, you're probably going to get more rustic wine. And if you go to a place that, you know, looks after its wine this little more, like this place, Vinoteca Vides, that is fantastic, then you are going to get something a little more interesting and maybe a little help also from the waiter. And someone also commented that they find waiters in Spain often quite unhelpful when it comes to explaining the different wines are available. And sadly, this is really, really true. There is a massive gap in the training for waiters and bartenders here in this country. Why is it? Well, I don't know. I mean, guess it goes to do with that tradition and how wine has been traditionally here. But it also goes to show that I don't think the patrons are asking enough questions of the waiters such that the managers know that they need to train their waiters better. And again, I don't blame the waiters, I blame the managers who are not saying, hey guys, let's sit down this week and taste the wines that are available. Let's learn about them. But as I say, if the patrons aren't asking questions and saying, hey, what wine have you got? Then there's no real incentive to train the waiters. But I do think that if waiters and bartenders were better trained about the wines they have available, that would really drive enthusiasm in the patrons. You know, the waiters can say, hey, have you tried this? Have you seen this? This is from this region. And that would get the patrons excited. The patrons would start kind of upping their knowledge, and it would be this joyous, wonderful circle instead of a vicious circle. So as an aside, I was recently at a really good restaurant in Cádiz. When I sat down, the waiter said to me, what do you guys want to drink? And I said, well, you know, what do you have available? What wines do you have available by the glass? He showed me the menu, and there was some really interesting wines available by the glass. It's kind of all around the wrong way, right? Show me the interesting wines, and then I'll tell you what I want. But the fact that that was his first question shows me that the people who are eating there, you know, 80-90% of them are not asking to see the list. They're just, saying, dame un Rioja, you know, I'll have a Rioja, Ribera, or whatever it may be, or a Jerez, or something like that. So look, how do you guarantee that you're going to be drinking good wine here in Spain? Well, look, one of the most important things you can do is go to good wine bars like this one, Vinoteca Vides. You can also find these places because you might be like, well, where are the good wine bars? Well, look, on this channel here, Spain Revealed, I have a lot of videos where I recommend places that do, you know, serve good wine. And it's just funny. I just wanted to mention this, talking about how so often, you know, waiters and bartenders aren't trained by their managers here in Spain. Just as I walked in here to be this, Vicente, who runs this place, was training his team. And so that is, you know, really what's going to help people drink better wine, promote the incredible wine that's made in this country. And I should just point out that these wines here, this big row of them, these are the wines that Vicente has of the week. So these are the wines you can get by the glass. You just don't see that all over the place. And this is wonderful. It's really promoting the wonderful variety of the wine in this country. Someone asked me on Instagram, they said, how can I order wines that a local would order? Regional wines, small producer, high quality. Well, I hope you've realized by now that just because someone's Spanish and they're from here doesn't mean that they're ordering that kind of wine. A lot of people are just drinking, you know, dame un vino tinto, you know, ponme un vino tinto, like whatever red wine is the default one that the bar will serve them. So I just want you to get that out of your head, that because Spain makes a lot of wine, it doesn't mean that we're all wine experts here. Now, having said all all of that, I love drinking locally and I really recommend you do it. But you know, drinking locally is a bit of a lucky dip. It's a real mix. You sometimes don't know what you're gonna get. So if you're in a bar or if you're in a region, you could say, ponme un vino de la zona. You know, give me a wine from this area and see what turns up. I did that recently in Castilla-La Mancha, and the guy just put down a bottle with my callos, with my tripe stew, and said just go for it. He wasn't going to charge me anything more than a glass because it was pretty cheap stuff, but it was good, it was rustic, it was fine. Drinking locally is as you guys know, is an act of discovery. It's an adventure, so sometimes it might be rough and not perfect, and that's okay. That's what understanding and learning about wine is all about. And also just be aware that just because you order a vino de la zona, it might not be a red wine or a white wine or whatever you're looking for. You know, if you're in Cadiz, as Yoly and I were recently, and you ask for a vino de la zona, you're probably going to get maybe a white wine or a sherry, you know, from the Jerez region. If you're in Rías Baixas, they make red wine, you're probably going to get a white, and if you're in Rioja, you're probably going to get a red. They might ask, but probably not. If you're in Madrid, I suggest you do try and drink Madrid wine, the local wine. But here's the thing, it might be hard to find in some places. Not all Madrid bars will serve Madrid wine. Why is that? Because it is the local wine? Well, partly because in the taverns here in Madrid, historically, people used to drink wine from Valdepeñas, a region to the south. And in the restaurants, the kind of classier meals, you'd be drinking Rioja or sherry. So you might struggle to find Madrid wine, but if you do find it, they have it here at Casa Ciriaco, the super amazing historic bar on the Calle Mayor that you have to visit. They do have it here. This is what I'm drinking. If you go to Catalonia, I've generally found in Catalonia there's a really rich winemaking tradition, lots of wine regions within the region of Catalonia, and you'll find that you'll be able to get Catalan wine in those restaurants and bars. Ponme un vino de la zona and just see what turns up. And because I can never avoid sharing a little history with you guys, if you do come to Casa Ciriaco, see if you can eat in the restaurant and ask nicely if you can get a little look down at the underground caverns beneath the restaurant. Super cool, where the wine used to be stored, where the wine still is stored, and chutes over here where back in the day wine would be shipped in from Valdepeñas to the south, Rioja to the north, the full bit. This place is over 100 years old and is magical, so ask nicely, you might get a look. So wine tourism. Now I'm drinking this little sherry, this Amontillado little. This is actually a very old wine from a great little wine bar in Cadiz called Taberna Manzanilla. If you're there, check it out. The stuff is delicious, straight from the barrel. A few people asked about wine tourism, kind of how can you do that in Spain? It's becoming more of a thing in Spain, wine tourism. More wineries are setting themselves up to offer it, but it's still a little bit hard sometimes. You really have to organize yourself, call ahead. You can't just show up. However, my favorite experiences have been either in the smaller wineries in the big regions or in the smaller wine regions. If you remember from that visit to Fabio's winery in Ribeira Sacra, I mean, we were the only ones there. He took us out to the vineyards. It was amazing. And at the really big wineries in the big regions, you don't quite get that personalized treatment. So yeah, wine region is a thing, but you kind of have to organize yourself. You got to get, you know, call ahead and maybe take a wine tour or something like that. But trust me, it is possible, and it's amazing touring the wine regions of this country. Salud. So guys, if you want to keep learning about Spanish wine, check out the description below. I've included some resources there. Also, check out the other wine videos we've made. There's a playlist appearing around my head somewhere now. Click that. There's more videos about Spanish wine there. We'll see you over there in a moment, and we'll see you at the bar. Ciao.